Thank you for being here. I'm Ronnie Thompson, Mayor of Morganton. Welcome to this beautiful day. On Monday it's supposed to be 80% rain, so Jimmy has said several prayers and the clouds have cleared. On behalf of the City Council and our staff, welcome. I have two councilmen with me, Butch McSwain and Chris Jernigan with us today. We're just so pleased that this project has come to fruition. And let's give Jimmy a hand for it. A couple of special guests, John and Eric Egger from Asheville, I believe, are in the crowd. We thank you for coming. And back here in the back, thank y'all so much for being here. At this time, I'm going to call on retired Superior Court Judge Claude L, if he'll come forward and make some remarks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. It's a nice crowd. It's a nice day. I don't know who was responsible for today. We thought it was going to be about 80% rain. So hope you enjoyed this tent. I'm going to be very brief, but I want to tell you a little bit about the guy that's responsible for this occasion, for the monument. And that guy's name is Jimmy Warlick. He grew up in Chesterfield, went to high school at Oak Hill. Hey, great, we got our group in Chesterfield. Graduated from there and went to State College, but he decided that he's going to get in some politics, I think, so he got to following Jimmy, what was that president's name down in Jimmy Carter, that's right. And so he started making political buttons for him and selling them on the street at the convention. He made more money selling those political buttons for Jimmy Carter than he had made in a year for the congressman. And so, after eating peanuts as his diet, he ended up going into political memorabilia and started selling buttons at Jimmy Carter's conventions and both sides of the political spectrum. Well, he was on one side, but he sure did sell a lot for Reagan and for others, and managed Clinton's campaign and sold buttons. He has the White House gifts now in Washington, D.C., and has done so much for this county. What really makes me feel good is the fact that he hasn't forgotten the people in Chesterfield. He has furnished things for them, gloves, jackets, and so many other things out there. He bought computers for many, many of those kids, and just a few things that other people wouldn't do. Took them on a balloon ride. I never have been on one, but I'm afraid they might shoot it down. Anyhow, it's good to see each of you here, and I'm glad we didn't cut down this tree. At least we have shade. So thank you again for coming. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about him, but Jimmy Warlick is a guy that you'll hear more about. And he loved his family. He loved his mother. She taught him right. And Jimmy, that's all I got to say. Love you.
Thank all of you for being here today. My mother taught us that the two most powerful words in the language was thank you. And so my sisters and I, that has guided us these many years, and there are so many people to thank today. The people I want to thank first, though, are the mill workers here in Burke County who may be here today, along with these three mill workers. If you worked in the mills here in Burke County in any fashion, please raise your hand. Let's give those people. This project could not have happened without the people in this museum, the board. This is the third project that I've done with the museum, and every time I pitched them with an idea, they were very supportive. And this one we started 6 years ago. And originally the monument was going to be actually 24 feet high down at the intersection at an historic old mill where my grandfather had worked. But the Department of Interior has to approve anything that goes on land like that or a building site. And they said that the people that we had originally designed, they were too tall, that they had to be life-size. And so I thought, no, they don't have to be life-size. And so we came to this museum and this board and told them what we'd like to do, and they unanimously approved it and have been supported now for 6 years in this. We lost 3 years, 2 years to COVID. We lost another year because we couldn't get steel because of the supply chain. And sometimes we thought it would never happen with COVID, but we were able to. And not only the board of this museum, but the people that work here. People probably don't know this, but everybody that works at this museum are volunteers. And I want to give you some names of those people that I see every day when I'm down. Waits Gordon, who is the chairman of the board. Waits, would you stand? Michelle and Sandy and Terry and Susan and Phyllis and Wayne and Dave and Sue and Catherine and all the many docents that they have here. And my friends who always are here with me, people think they're part of the community too, or part of the museum, and that's Richard and Mo, who are my friends who live down the street, and they've helped me on so much here. I want to mention my founders board. Senator Steve Metcalf from Asheville is here with his brother and sister. Steve's family came from millworking families up in outside of Asheville in Inca, North Carolina. Edward Pfeiffer, a friend and a hero of mine, is on my board. Max Gardner III, who could not be here today, but has been with us and guiding us on this project these years. Vicki Cosby is on the board, and she could not be here today. Clark Irwin is on my board. And when you have a board, you always want the mayor on the board. So Mayor Ronnie Thompson is on our board. When we first got this idea, we were working on a project here, Roger Sharp and I, Dr. Roger Sharp, Senator Roger Sharp, if you voted for him in Morganton. And we said, you know, it'd be nice to see a nice exhibition on millworkers. And so it expanded. And we had 5 goals. Number 1 was capture the voices of the millworkers before they were lost. And so we started interviewing people. The second part was to set up a college scholarship foundation in my mother's name here at Western Piedmont Community College. We did that. Third was to put on an exhibition on the history of millworking in Burke County, the community that they lived in, the churches, everything about their lives, and even we do have to touch on the child labor that was used in some of the factories and mills around here. The monument was number 4. Now, after today, we will have done that, and we have one lasting project, and that's to produce a documentary on the millworkers that will work in conjunction with a program we're trying to set up in the local school system to teach local history. I didn't learn local history in school or anywhere. I learned it on my own and just loved history. But we think we can inspire those people with our ongoing project that we're doing with a new annex today, just renamed the Claude and Joe Sitton History Education Center. Roger's task was to set up a tour for us around the state. We went to a mill, Coolamy, a mill village. We went to Lexington, to Erlanger, where my friend Lanny Peters, who's here today from Atlanta, thank you. Excuse me. Good like Trump. Throw that in now, didn't I? Just and so Roger, we did these tours. We went to the Gastonia Lorraine Mill in Gastonia and saw the museum there. We were in Lexington and High Point. We were at the Levine Museum in Charlotte on the south, and we interviewed a lot of people to see what we really wanted to capture in the project. And I owe a great deal of gratitude to Roger Sharp for sticking with this for 6 years and getting us started. Once we started interviewing people at these museums, we realized we couldn't go back then. We had to keep going forward. Nothing would stand in the way. And I owe Roger Sharp for all of that. When we started the project, catching the interviews with people was foremost the thing we had to do first. And our first videographer was Louis Asbury III, and he was with us from day one. We set up a little studio. It looked like Charlie Rose with a black background and a round table. And we remember the first person we interviewed was Evelyn Newton. She was 94 years old. She was in a wheelchair. She sat at the table with me, and before we started and Louis was getting ready, she said, "Mr. Warlick," she said, I don't have much of a story. I was just a mill worker. And I said, "Mrs. Newton, you give me a little time, I'll find a story in there." Well, she talked for 2 hours. And her backbone was straight. Her face was flush. No one had ever asked her or made her feel what she did was important. So the next week, her daughter called me and said, "Mr. Warlick, Mama said you'd come back up there and talk some more for you." And that said it all. It was worth it all. Louis is a perfectionist in his work, and he and Amy have become good friends. Another young videographer we have today, Jess Barber. Here's Jesse. Here he is. Jesse is famous now. He's had photographs recently in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. He especially is going out into Appalachia and filming and photographing mountain people in Appalachia. He's won a documentary award for one he did on Wilson's Creek here. And you will hear a lot about this young fella. He's the next Ken Burns from North Carolina and from a mill worker family. And I also want to thank the local press here, the News Herald and the paper. They have given for years now us a lot of coverage on trying to capture photographs and stories from people so everyone would know about it. And without a good local newspaper to get the word out, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So I want to thank them. And I came out a few weeks ago, and my guy Lyle has been doing my brickwork and helping me fix the Kennedy car and everything I needed. Lyle has been here, and he said there was some woman by from Washington that said she left her card, Dr. Dawn Carpenter. And so I thought she had left or something, and when I went in the museum, she was doing a tour. And I said, "It, Dr. Carpenter?" And she said, "Jim Warlick." And she said, "Yes." And so she hugged me. Her grandmother worked in a mill in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And Dawn went on to Wall Street and worked for many years advising Fortune 500 companies on economic justice, putting back in the community with the profits they were making. She runs a project now at Georgetown University on economic justice, and one with Pope Francis on economic security for children around the world. Dawn Carpenter, where are you, Dr. Dawn? There we go. When I first started this, I didn't know anything about interviewing people for storyboard type stories. And so we go to Hickory, to Catawba Valley Community College, and Dr. Richard Eller down there is the guy who helped us learn how to do this. Richard is here today. He just completed a book just within the last 2 months on the furniture workers of Western North Carolina. Richard? Always in the back. There we go. Thank you, Richard. On my board of directors, there's always a round rod, as you know, if you've had a board before, which, you know, you really don't like boards, but you have to have them, right? You just want to make your own decisions and not have people interfering. Dee Dee Perkins, my cousin, has been the round rod of the board for these years. And she's been by my side with encouragement and assistance, and when it looked impossible. She's also my cousin, my mentor, and my hero for all she does for the less fortunate in Transylvania County. Now, none of this would be possible. There'd be no money in the budget if it weren't for Elisa Jones from Raleigh, North Carolina, originally from Asheville. Elisa started with me when she was 17 years old as an intern. She was running the business when she was 19 years old. She's since, when I only got a bachelor's degree, she was in high school then, and then a master's degree. She runs our businesses in Washington, not my business, our businesses. And she keeps the train running, and she keeps me encouraged and never lets me stop. She also runs my personal life. I don't know how much money I have. She handles all that. So, Elisa, please stand. I met this, I call her my little friend. She is a small woman, and she is from New York City. And she helped me on a project in Rhode Island on an Air Force One project. And I just loved her. And when she traveled with my traveling exhibition on John Kennedy, and when I mentioned doing this project, she jumped right into it. And I know it's because of the love that she had for her mother. She loved her mother. Her mother was a New York Mets fan, and she was a character at every ball game. And so it was Susan, who really had never been in the South much, but she researched the history of the mill workers in the South. She put together the website that we have, and these 15 panels inside on all aspects of mill worker life. Susan Del Rio, the little woman I say from New York City, is responsible. Susan? Susan's also responsible for finding the people who designed this monument. Called me and said, you got to go to Columbia, South Carolina. There's a fellow down there in a company called Pine House Design. They used the old Louis Hine. Louis Hine was a photographer. He took the great photographs of child labor all over the country. And Joe had taken some of these images and put at the Grundy Mill in Columbia, South Carolina to honor those workers. And so I went to Columbia and I met with him. And so I asked him to do a design for us. That's 6 years ago. The design you see today is almost exactly, and he only gave me one design to look at, exactly the way it is now. And so his partner, Joel, are amazing. The detail. They were here on Thursday night, right, Joe? We were putting the lights and tweaking the lights and everything. He's just a perfectionist. I want to say thank you, and I want Joe Weeder to say a few words for us.
I was a little nervous about making any comments, only because it's been a long, emotional, drawn-out process. It's hard to explain what we had to go through to create this. But I thought to myself, well, you know, It's right here. And I hope you all like it. Like, that's the true test. I failed miserably. But right from the beginning, having met Jim and having done another workers' monument, I thought the dignity of work. I remember years ago when I was working on a series of documentaries in Southern politics and dealing with the South in the post-Reconstruction era, someone gave me a poem. It was called The Dignity of Toil. It's what these people were going through after, the failure of the South and the Civil War and the economic nightmare they were confronted with, and the fact that they had to find a way to feed their families. And that really, the dignity of work and making these people into the heroes that they were, giving us food to eat, giving us a roof over our heads, clothing to wear. It means something. These people are really, truly heroes. I mean, you don't think of them as that because they're never given any celebrity value. So we thought, with Jim's input and inspiration, we thought, let's make these people the heroes they are today, which is why our first monument was 45 feet across and 25 feet high, billboard size. It was a drive-by experience. I didn't even know the road. It was the Alpine Mills site, and it was perfect. So when we couldn't do that there, it was like, oh, now what would we do? But I'm very pleased. It's been a great experience. These people are working people are the foundation of this country. They need to be our heroes today. We need to value them. We need to support them. We need to make sure that people get paid what they're worth, men and women equally. I mean, I think there are so many things we can learn from this whole experience and what these people did for us. And that's all I have to say. And I hope you like it. It'll be here for a long time, so you better start liking it. Thank you, everyone.
Someone who drives a Honda automobile BBJ 5176 is blocking someone's driveway. He should be moved, or else we'll have to have it pulled. Thank you.
More closely, when we started the project, we toured Henry River Mill Village in the eastern part of Burke County. And when we got there to the new owners were trying to restore the mill village, they kept talking about this guy named Ray Burns. Ray Burns was the hero of that village. He was one of the first ones to graduate from high school. He worked for a pharmacist in Hildebrand, and the pharmacist said to Ray, "Young man, if you get good grades and you qualify for college, I will help you go through college." Ray did. He went on to the University of South Carolina and became a wonderful pharmacist, and is responsible for setting up pharmacies in poor areas of South Carolina. He is the last surviving person who grew up in Henry River Mill Village and worked in the Mill Village alongside his parents. Ray is with us today from Columbia, South Carolina. I'd like Ray to speak to us.
What an incredibly nice day to be here, isn't it? I am so happy to come back home. I left Henry River Mill Village some years ago, and I don't get back here as much as I'd like to. But it's people like those sitting here with me today that bring me back. Kind, generous, hardworking people. I am probably the luckiest man that has ever lived in Burke County. I do believe that. God is my witness. I'm probably the luckiest man around. I was the first person in my family tree to ever graduate from high school. And I'll have some tears, I was the first person to ever leave this community to go away to college. And it was because somebody reached in and gave me some attention and some encouragement. and that guy just happened to be a pharmacist. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and become Doc Brandon down on the corner, or Dr. Burns down on the corner. And what an incredible life it has been for me. He said to me, going to college, you probably ought to go to a small school first. And I said, like what? He said, well, there's a college over near Shelby called Gardner-Webb College. That'd be a good place for you to go. And I said, all right, I'll go to Gardner-Webb. I went to Gardner-Webb, did quite well, applied to the University of North Carolina and the University of South Carolina to pharmacy schools. Because Doc had gone to the University of South Carolina, he'd been raised in an orphanage in South Carolina. Because he had gone there, I followed in his footsteps. Well, it didn't quite work out that way because this was in the 60s and the draft was going on, and I was about to be drafted. I said, oh my goodness, what do I do with this? As it turns out, I wanted to do anything I could to keep from going to Vietnam. So I joined the Navy Reserve. It was 2 years active and then 4 years inactive. Well, guess what? The first I went on active duty. I was on a ship that was in dry dock. A month later, it came out to go to Vietnam. So I was in Vietnam twice. And when I came back, I couldn't afford to go back to Columbia to finish school, so I started at the Medical University, and with the help of God and a lot of kind, wonderful people, the GI Bill, I was able to finish school and stay around and go to graduate school and get an advanced degree. That was just, I've just been lucky. As I say, I'm the luckiest man in Burke County. But before I say anything more about me, I want to echo what you've said, what other people have said about Jim Warlick. Jim is a friend of mine, and Jim is my hero. He's my hero. He hasn't forgotten from whence he came. Jimmy and Dr. Sharp have changed the lives of more young people than we'll ever know about. Jesse Barber is back. Jesse, wave to us one more time. Jesse is one of those that they touched, and he has followed in the footsteps of Dr. Sharp, and he is going places. I'm so proud of him. Thank you, Jesse, for the decisions that you made. As I understand it, I'm the last living person that ever worked in the cotton mill of Henry River Mills. I'm the last one standing. People I grew up with are dead. When I go back to the village, there are a few people that I can go see that I know. I can count them on one hand. They died early. They died with fingers missing, or they died with whatever. But they worked hard. They were good people, and it feels so good to be back there. Calvin Reyes and his family are doing a terrific job in trying to resurrect that village and make it available for generations to come. I have a lot of respect for them. I'm now retired, and I like to hang out with the likes of Roger and Jimmy to try to make the world a better place. I learned working in the mill and from my family that it's important to be kind to everybody. To be kind to everybody. But first, you must be honest. You must be honest. You must be kind to everybody. Doc Brandon taught me something that Jimmy has shown me it works. You have to think clearly, and you have to think with some creativity. Jimmy has embodied that. And so my wife, Susan, who is here, and I work with young people throughout South Carolina to help them reach down and help them come from families that were hardworking but didn't have the ticket out. So I am delighted my sister Patsy is here. Patsy, would you stand, please? I want to recognize her because I was born in 1949, and my mother met my father in the cotton mill. He had just gotten back from the war. He met her. 2 weeks later, he proposed. He proposed to marry her 2 weeks later. They married, and in 1949, July 6th, I was born. As it turns out, 2 years later, in 2 weeks, my sister was born. And as it turns out, 2 years and 2 days later, my brother was born. I used to kid my mother, it was those cool October nights. But, so I am so glad to be back here. And what a wonderful problem to have. So many people to come out and celebrate what Claude and Jimmy and all the workers here have contributed to this community. I am grateful from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's my sincere honor. And what I'm clear about is none of this would have been possible without the transition of the dirt farmers, my ancestors from Piney Mountain and the valley of the South Fork River, becoming mill workers at the cotton mills, the hosiery mills, and the furniture factories here in Burke County. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Ray. When we were, well, I guess that, when we were trying to decide who would go on the monument, obviously my mama was going to go up because that's what inspired me to do this project. But we had to choose a furniture worker, and so I looked around. I had wonderful neighbors who were furniture workers. I had friends whose fathers worked in the furniture industry. Turner Schnack's father, Marion, was a great example of a good, decent man. But next door to me was Claude Moore. He grew up in South Carolina. He became fatherless at a young age, but he took care of his mother. After going to World War II and coming back, he moved to North Carolina, and he married Harrison Warlick, my father's sister. And so he was my uncle. So some people say I've loaded the monument with my uncle, my mother, and my cousin Anne. And Claude was a decent man. He was a non-drinker. He was active in his church. He was the best neighbor to everyone and a good friend for anybody that he met. His son, Vance, his only child, is here today, and his daughter-in-law, Susan. But Vance and Susan stand. Uncle Claude used to get on to me because I'd go borrow his newspaper. I loved newspapers as a kid, and he always got the Star Observer. And so I'd go, and sometimes I'd grab it even before he had gotten to it or through it. And he once said, "Jimmy, why don't you buy your own newspaper?" And I said, "Uncle Claude, I don't have to. I just borrow yours." So, Claude Moore was a man of dignity, and what he stands for in representing furniture workers will be here forever. Wherever you walk, Claude's eyes will follow you. I'm telling you, he's following you. Anne's eyes will follow you. You can't do anything without Anne and Claude following you. My mother, the center of this monument, I'm going to leave that to my kid sister, Megan. to say a few words about her. I get too choked up, so I'm going to let Megan talk about her. My sister Sandy is here. His sister, my niece and nephew are here. And I think half the crowd are my cousins here. Or they claim to be, I don't know. And so, Megan?
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Sylvie, the youngest sibling of Mary Warlick, and I'm here to tell you about my sweet Mama Mary. She's the center figure on this Dignity of Work monument, along with these other two heroes. She grew up Mary Harrison, one of 9 siblings to Ernest and Bertha Harrison, in the Lost Corner community of Morganton. She raised us in the community of Chesterfield, about 8 miles from here. Our father was often absent, which required our mother Mary to have tremendous resolve and great faith. We are so proud of our mother Mary. For 33 years, she worked in the hosiery mill, starting at the age of 16 until she turned 49 years old. 33 years is a very long time, and our mother, for her, I'm sure it seemed like a lifetime. She dropped out of school when she was in 9th grade, and when she left the mill, she had raised 3 children into adulthood. She raised us to work hard, to do our best at everything, to be kind to others, and she instilled in us the act of service to others. And most of all, she modeled for us the act of sacrifice. Hers was a life of sacrifice for her 3 kids. Our mother Mary rose every morning before sunrise to get ready for work. When Sandy and Jimmy were little, she fixed breakfast every morning for them while they sat by the stove to stay warm in the winter. Then they were fed, she'd go to work. She'd catch a ride at the top of the hill with one of our neighbors in Chesterfield. Men like Ira Absher, Junior Clontz, Donald Hamrick, who were also going to work in the furniture factories, Drexel and Henry Don. She did not own a car, so she relied on neighbors and families for rides to work, to the grocery store, and to church on Sundays. Years later, when she did have a car and Sandy and Jimmy by this time were grown and had left the house, she'd get up still before the dawn, make my breakfast, just the 2 of us, and on cold mornings when she was driving me to Chesterfield School, we'd play to try to guess when the heat would come on in the car and warm us up. She dropped me off at Chesterfield in the cafeteria, where I would sit with the lunchroom ladies until the school opened. At dinner, Mama always made sure that our plates were made first and that we had what we wanted before she fixed hers. After a long day at work, she'd come home to fix dinner. She had a garden. And on Wednesdays, she'd make sure she took us to church. On Sundays, every Sunday, we went to church. And Mama made sure we had our best Sunday clothes on. Patent leather shoes, white socks, a dress, Jimmy in pressed pants, and a collared shirt. We did not have much monetarily, but Mama sacrificed everything to make sure we always looked our best. And it was these small sacrifices she made for us that are everlasting in our hearts. Her most proud accomplishment were us 3 children, and we grew up knowing that our Mama loved us unconditionally. Before she died, she was blessed enough to find joy in watching her 4 grandchildren grow up, and she showered them with that same unconditional love. They lovingly referred to her as Granny. 33 years is a very long time at the same job. Imagine that. Mama darned pantyhose for 8 hours a day. She would hold the hose up to see if there was a flaw, and then she would fix it if there was, and then she'd toss it in a big bin. 33 years is somewhere around 7,000 days. and at the same repetitive task. In an environment where cotton dust hung in the air and the machines were rumbling so loudly that you could not even talk to your neighbor at the next station. And she was paid by the piece. So if she did not go to work, she did not get paid. And she hardly missed a day of those 33 years. And I know there was some days she did not feel like going to work. But our mother's story is not just her story. It's the story of many folks growing up here in Morganton and Burke County during the mid-20th century who worked in our area textile mills and our furniture factories, who labored long hours day in and day out, who were the backbone of our communities, of our schools, and of our churches, who were the glue that held our families together, and who shaped many of us here today into who we are. So while I and Sandy and Jimmy and my own kids and her grandkids are grateful for our mother, Mary Warlick, we also celebrate today the hard work, the values, and the lessons of the mill workers of Burke County. Finally, I want to say a personal thank you on behalf of our family to the museum and for the support of the Workers Legacy Project and for working with the City of Morganton to allow this beautiful monument to be installed, and for your dedication to the preservation of Burke County's rich history. Thank you.
Megan is principal of Thomasville High School. She's going to retire in a year or two. I don't know how she does that job. When I was looking around for someone to represent the textile workers, my friend Ronnie Thompson said, "You've got to meet this lady down in Drexel. She would be perfect. She epitomizes goodness, active in her church, raised wonderful children, and everybody loves her. And if you put Anne Ramseur on the monument, everybody will already know who she is." When I met Anne, everything Ronnie had said about her, all the praises that he had mentioned about her were true. And then after hours of recording conversation with her, and I sat amazed listening to Anne, and every time we talk on the phone, I want to capture her voice again and again and again. She's the grand lady today. How many people get to be on a monument while they're still alive? Anne is unique in so many ways, and that's just one of them. Anne Ramseur.
As I look back over the many years, it was clear to me that hard work and family commitment was definitely the key to a successful family life and financial stability. Enduring through loud machine noise and long hours of standing on my feet each day, the biggest reward were the lasting friendships that I experienced over those many years with supervisors and co-workers. Many of those friends and associates have passed on, and those of us that are still here, our bond and our friends remain strong. Working 40 hours a week and on my feet, and sometimes even with weekend work, there were good days and bad days. But I hold dear to my heart those treasured members of yesterday. We laugh, we joke, and most importantly, we work hard every day. Okay, as I stand, as I stand here today and as I reflect on the past, I am very grateful and honored to be part of an area of the Workers' Legacy Foundation, which represents the character and integrity of people who were hardworking and dedicated. For this is truly an honor to have received this recognition. Being a part of this Worker Legacy Foundation and being a stepping stone in history is truly, truly uplifting. And I thank you, and I thank you.
I'm going to ask Anne's family to come up and stand with us. Anne, you want to introduce all your children? Ronald, Donald, and Deborah. Not going to take much longer. I'll introduce all my cousins. I had 32 aunts and uncles. So you can imagine how many, don't need that one either. You can imagine how many cousins I have. And I see a lot of them in the crowds here today. So if you're related to me, raise your hand. And those of you that are not, I would love to be related to you. Last weekend, an editorial was written in the newspaper here by the editor of the paper, a new publication here that's really community oriented. And it was from the editor, his name is Bill Petit. He worked in the factories here growing up, and his parents worked in these factories. And when he came to see the monument, he was so impacted by it that he wrote some beautiful words. I'd ask Bill today to relate that statement of passion that he wrote last week. Bill Petit.
How many of y'all are seeing the monument for the first time today? Well, I came up here in late April. I had seen the photographs of the monument, Jim, as it was being lowered into place, as it was being installed. But John, the impact of this monument did not really hit me until I stood squarely in front of it. And I knew that this monument represents my family. It represents my roots, and in so many ways it represents the man that I am today. How many of y'all are hot? My daddy never went to work wearing a coat and tie, so I don't mind taking that off. My blood is equal parts sawdust and cotton dust. The sawdust coming from my daddy's side and the cotton dust coming from my mama's. Where to start? My mama grew up on a cotton farm in Rutherford County, the eldest of 13 siblings. Her stories of toiling under the late summer sun, picking row after row of cotton until her fingers ached and bled and her shoulders grew weary from the weight of the bag, were staples of my childhood. She told those stories when I or my older brothers complained about the drudgery of a few hours spent shucking corn or stringing and breaking green beans. In her late teens, she was weary of being a surrogate mama for her younger siblings, and she was beaten down by the harsh realities of farm life, and she fled north to the little town of Drexel. Her first cousin, Verna, had also made a run from the farm and had found work at Drexel Hosiery Mill. Mama joined her on the production line, and the pair of young women shared a small apartment. And both found the hosiery mill, despite the noise and the heat and the repetition, to be a virtual paradise compared to the sunrise to sundown drudgery of farm work. And then there was my dad. He was born in 1912, and he was the son of one of Drexel Furniture's original employees, my grandfather, John Petit. Grandpa John was a cabinet maker for Drexel, a skilled and proud artisan. But tragedy struck the family in 1915, when my grandmother died in a flu epidemic. My dad was not yet 3 years old. Family legend has it, because there was nothing else to do with him, that Grandpa John used to take my toddler dad to work with him and hide him in drawers and closets during the workday. True story. At the age of 12, having completed just 7 grades of formal education, my dad, who by his own confession was wild as a buck, joined his dad in the Drexel Furniture workforce. And yes, in 1924, it was perfectly legal for a child of 12 to work in a dangerous furniture factory. We have come a long way. The furniture worker and the hosiery mill worker married in 1935. My dad served his country proudly in the Army Air Corps during World War II. And then he sired 3 sons, the last of whom was me. Sometime after the war, he made the transition from the factory floor to the corporate office, running the busy mailroom, supervising the night custodial staff, and also driving Drexel salesmen and executives back and forth from the Charlotte airport during market season. And of course, that was when the Drexel showroom was in Drexel. That furniture worker and hosiery mill worker are, and always will be, the shining examples upon which I have tried to base my life. They taught me the value of work, of self-reliance, of striving to be better, no matter what the hand you're dealt. They also taught me the value of education, because my mama and daddy always insisted that their life would not be my life. I owe them a debt I can never repay. This Dignity of Work monument reminds me of that debt, reminds me of my heritage, and reminds me of just what heroes my mom and daddy were. But it also reminds me, as it does all of us, that my parents, my people, were not alone. They were part of a generation, a great generation, who worked hard, who loved their children, who fought for their country, who worshiped their God, and who forever made proud the dignity of work. Thank you.
Anne said she's tired. She worked 35 years and 10 months in the mill. I'm about ready to wrap up with something, and I want to say that the monument is wonderful, I think, and I hope you do too, but please see the exhibition inside. There's a lot of heart that went into that exhibition. There are refreshments after and desserts that have been brought down from the cold mountains of Brevard, North Carolina by Dee Dee. And I want to end with this. My favorite book is John Steinbeck's Cannery Row. And if you know the story, Cannery Row is about the working people in Monterey who worked in the sardine factories. And Steinbeck opens the book this way. Cannery Row in Monterey in California is a poem, a stink, a grating noise, a quality of light, a tone, a habit, a nostalgia, a dream. It is the gathered and scattered rusty tin heaps, little crowded groceries, flop houses, and weedy lots. A man looking in from the outside said he only saw bums, no goods, and losers. Another man looking through that same keyhole said he saw saints and angels and holy men. As I look out today through my keyhole, I see friends, neighbors, family, and all of you, and you are my saints and angels and holy men. Thank you.